Thank you everybody for joining in today and accepting our invitation to join. I'm Srinath Perera, Director for the Center for Smart Modern Construction, and with me Bijan Samali. Professor Bijan Samali is the Director for Center for Infrastructure Engineering at Western Sydney University. So Bijan had been speaking to you, I think, so probably you're aware of his presence, but what we are trying to do today is actually have a simple discussion with industry representatives who are here, and there are some other academic colleagues and researchers joining in as well, to have a chat with you to see what you have as important issues, problems related to the construction sector from the construction industry, and then see how we can, whether we can identify key issues coming out of it, and see whether the university can collaborate and provide some solutions for those where possible. It's not a formal setup here, just what we thought was we will give you an understanding of what we want to do, and then provide some context for this discussion, and then move on. So in that respect, we are taking sustainability as sustainable development in a broader sense, using the UN Brundtland Commission definition, development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's a very broad definition, as you can see. And then in sustainability here, we are talking not only about environmental sustainability, which is the most commonly referred to aspect of sustainability. We are also talking about economic sustainability and social sustainability. So that these three aspects are applicable to the construction sector, and we are looking at that in a broader sense. Okay. So just to introduce the Center for Smart Modern Construction a little bit, its mission is to develop a smart modern construction industry that is capable of dealing with challenges of the 21st century using concepts and technologies brought forward by the fourth industrial revolution. So this is basically bringing in the concepts and technologies into resolving issues related to the construction sector. And that's our main focus, and our vision is basically to focus our work on key areas of sustainability, digitalization, industrialization, resilience, and globalization. In that, we are looking at digitalization of the construction sector. Then how can sustainability help in that process? Then industrialization of the construction sector. There's lots of work happening in prefabrication, offsite construction areas, and what are the issues coming out of that? Then we know construction supply chains are global, they are not local, and they have been heavily tested and affected by the COVID-19 crisis. So what are the issues coming out of that? Sustainability in general, what are the important aspects that we want to look at, and how do we build resilience in all these aspects in the construction sector? That's an important agenda as well. And then we would be keen to look at disaster resilience in that context as well. So there's the impact of bushfires, floods happening in Australia, and then this COVID-19 as a pandemic impacted on the construction sector. So how the construction companies are coping with that, these are important things that we can look at as well. So this is just to give some context onto what we are doing and what we want this conversation to head on to. This is basically some of the research projects that the center is involved in. You can find more details of these projects in our center website. So I'm not going to go into details so that we can have this conversation going. Right. So I would invite Bijan to talk a little bit about
Yes, sure.
Center for Infrastructure Engineering.
Thank you, Srinath. Our two centers are fairly complementary, and we are mostly, of course, focused on the engineering side of it. Particularly our facilities, I would like to emphasize, we have one of the best testing facilities in the country, and we are offering it to the industry. We have the highlights of them. We have a very complete structures laboratory with a large, strong floor, several hydraulic jacks of different size and capacity, one of the largest compressive testing machines, presses in Australia with the capacity of 10,000, 1,000 tons, 10,000 kilonewtons. And also ovens for testing, fire testing of components, furnace for fire testing of, again, larger components and smaller structures. We also have a very advanced environmental chamber capable of doing all kinds of testing on temperature, UV, water penetration, as well as accelerated testing for corrosion and so on. So these are some of the capacities. The center has been in operation for about 8 years and has close to 40 PhD students, which we also can take advantage of their expertise for different projects. One thing I'd like to say, Srinath, as a preamble to our discussion, is that the governments around the world, and Australian government is no exception, have really turned the research and focus around. When I started as an academic 35 years ago, I had a hobby to research on something, and I go to the head of the school and the university and they give me money and a student to do it. It led to something which was mostly publications, even very prestigious journals, not to be seen or read by anyone. It just shelved for eternity sometimes. That was the scene then. Things now completely have changed now. The governments come and say, academics have to show cause. You have to show what you want to do is of interest to industry and of value to the country. So the focus is back on industry to define projects. And my job as director is not to go out and design projects. I go to industry and say, what you need done. We had a very simple but effective conversation with dear Kathy Inglis an hour ago, and that was exactly what we talked about. She needed to do something. Our job is not to argue with it, whether it's good or bad. Say, is that what you need? We oblige. And the funding is also very interesting. The funding model has also gone to the industry to lead. In other words, the governments have created an environment that if they want to support something, they want to make sure industry is supporting it in the first place. So if I go to Kathy, and sorry, Kathy, I use you as an example today because I know you well enough to say, if Kathy comes to me and say, I'm happy to spend $100,000 on this project, that sets the limits for matching funding. Then for her 100,000, I can go to university, get another 100,000, go to Australian Research Council, get another 100,000. So the research pool extends to 300,000. On the contrary, if she comes and says, I got only $10,000 to do it, then it's 10,000 from government and 10,000 from university. So you suddenly have one order of magnitude, a smaller funding and a smaller project. So I wanted to emphasize this, that you as industry leaders, you need to drive the agenda and the universities respond accordingly. Sorry, I took a bit longer than I intended, Srinath, but I thought maybe that's important to mention.
No problem, Bijan. It's good to have a conversation. And the next point that we want to do is have some brief introductions from our industry participants There are quite a few of industry companies represented here. Could you voluntarily go ahead and introduce yourself rather than me calling different companies, or I can go ahead and call individually? But some of the names are not properly written, so I'm not 100% sure then.
I'm happy to introduce myself, Srinath.
Yes, Brendan.
Yes, hello all. My name is Brendan Williams. I'm here representing Engineers Australia. So I sit on the Sydney Division Committee, which is effectively the New South Wales member representative leadership group. I'm also a casual lecturer at Western Sydney University on the topic of quality management in construction. And I represent the management consulting profession. So it's an interesting space, the engineering and the management consulting in collaboration with academia, a very important combination. And I suppose my day job then is running my management consulting firm to help organisations in the transport infrastructure space.
Okay, thanks, Brendan.
Srinath, it's Colin Domnish here. I'm the Regional Director for Southern Hemisphere with GHD Digital. Absolute pleasure to see a number of friends and colleagues on the call that I recognise. Great to be with you today, and thanks for the opportunity, Srinath.
Thank you, Colin.
Oh, good afternoon, folks. This is Charles Castasilli. I'm the Chief Executive of the Western Sydney Regional Organisation of Councils. Of course, representing local government in the third largest economic region of Australia. As local government, we're always interested in what we can do to facilitate, encourage and promote the use of sustainable materials in construction in all its various forms.
Thank you, Charles. It's good to have government representation, council representation here. It's a very important part of our industry.
Right. Sorry, James Glastonbury here, Srinath. I'm Director for Langer Hawkes Australia Business. I sit on the Australia board. Really important industry conversation to be having, and so I applaud EWS and Centre for Smart Modern Construction for convening this conversation. Yeah, lots for us collectively as an industry to address, particularly given our role in the economic rebuilding coming out of the year that we've had.
Thank you, James.
Hi, Srinath. I'm Anu Judit, the Managing Director of Turner & Townsend. We're global project program management consultants, and I look after the Asia Pacific region. Similar to the comments made earlier, I'm really looking forward to this. This is such a very valid topic, and I'm glad you mentioned as well, it's not just environmental sustainability. I think it's the full sustainability of the construction industry. There's so much we have and should do. It is a big part of the world's economy, and making it sustainable is certainly something very much needed.
Yes. Nick, you want to introduce?
Yeah, I was just about to jump on through that. So Nick Lazar, I'm the State Manager from Hanson Yunkin. Nice to see everyone on the line this afternoon. And I tend to agree with the comments. It's a very large topic of conversation, and I think it's good that we can get everyone together to have a bit of a conversation about it, but also keen to see if we can break it down into some bite-sized chunks where we can actually make some difference in quick wins.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. So hi guys, my name is Bao Yingtong. I'm with AECOM, and I'm also a project manager in building sector reform with Engineers Australia. And surely I'm very excited about this conversation, and I think it will have a big impact on the future of the construction industry. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Brian.
Hi everyone, Sean Devison here. I'm the director and founder of Lighthouse Futures. We're a sustainable procurement and a circular economy based consulting firm. We're on the New South Wales Government Sustainability Advantage panel for those services. And good to see you, Bijan. You're one of my lecturers back at UTS. So good to see you for the first time in many years.
Good to see you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
I'll jump in. Hi, all. I'm Kathy Inglis. I'm General Manager of Technical and Innovation at Brickworks Building Products. One part of my role is to drive sustainability through our manufacturing, but also in our products. And as Bijan mentioned before, we're talking to him about some projects. We use their lab, the Western Sydney lab, for a fair bit of testing. And now we're hoping to be able to partner in a project on some new sustainable products, which is great. And I think working all together on this, we can make some improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. That's great.
Can I jump in now, please? Because I just like to introduce ourselves, and also because we were given a time frame of 12:30 to 1, and we have another meeting, Poppy and I, to go to at 1 o'clock. So Tina Perinotto and Poppy Johnston from the Fifth Estate. So I'm not quite sure what our role is here today, and you know, it'd be good to sort of understand where we can fit and what we can do to help.
Thank you, Tina. It's always good to have your interest on this agenda. We would like you to, if you can report on what we are discussing, would be good. But if you can't stay along, we are recording the session. We'll make it available for you to have a look.
Okay, I get it. So I thought this is bigger than what we thought. I can see that there's a lot of people involved, and it is going to take quite a bit of you know, attention to get to the bottom of it, and to see what everyone's saying, because I think that's really interesting. So if it's recorded, we'll stay till 1 o'clock, and then we'll tune in. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Well,
hello, everyone. Matthew Edwards here, Director of Stephen Edwards Construction, so a Sydney-based builder.
Thank you, Matthew. Good to see you. We have our Deputy Dean, Yang Shang, Deputy Dean of School of Engineering. Would you like to say some words? Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Srinath. I didn't expect that you're going to call my name. But anyway, I'm so happy that we have so many industry representatives here today in this forum. And I can say that the passion from us, from the academic, and also from the industry and the government bodies in terms of addressing many of the challenges in the sustainability area, which we are really want to work with you. As Bijan said, now I would say you're the boss. You can tell us what you need, and then we'll come to the party and say what we can do with you together. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Yang.
Robert,
I saw you just joining. Robert Whittaker?
I've been here for a little while, but I've been in driving, as you could tell. Bob Whittaker from the Institute of Building in this instance, also a director of Hold'em Whittaker. We're keen to see the industry thrive in changing times. If we do not do something about sustainability ourselves, it'll get mandated for us, and then we'll have things which we may or may not like. So I applaud the university for its initiative here. Thank you.
So if I haven't called you, but I would be happy if you can jump in and introduce anyone from industry who want to introduce yourselves. There are lots of researchers from the centers, to the 2 centers and the schools here, and academic staff joining in as well. But is there anybody else who want to, before we jump into the questions that we want to discuss?
Yeah, Srinath, I'll just jump in if I may. John Smolder's here. I'm an academic there at Western Sydney. I've been in the construction industry now this year for 50 years, as a matter of fact. So I've got a little bit of background in all this, but I think the distinguishment has to be made who we are dealing with. We're dealing with the tier 1, 2 companies, which are pretty well already fairly well advanced in sustainability. If you look at their website, they're all promoting it. My concern is the smaller SMEs that are out there that really conducted
and controlled via the council through the DA legislation, what have you. I think that's where the importance lies. And also, of course, the fact that most of the smaller builders are heading south because of the slim margins that they can put on their contracts. There's no room for them to really advance anything any further what they really want to, except keep the doors open and barely survive. The larger contractors, of course, have the benefit of procurement, whether it be a 50-50 contract, 60-40 contract, where these factors can be factored into and the awarding of their contract. So I think that's basically where I see the problem lies. I think there's a keenness for all parties to get on board, but you've got to make the situation palatable.
Thank you, John. I think you kick-started the discussion well, hitting on one of the key points that are important in this agenda. So it's an open agenda, as I mentioned earlier. What we are looking for is what are the main issues related to sustainability. So, and we want to hear from the industry and your voice, because we need to, as academic institutions, if we are not working on areas that the industry is not industry is interested, then we are not doing what we should be doing. We are public institution. We are using taxpayers' money, so we need to serve our industry. That's how we see it from our end in the university, and therefore we need to understand what you from the industry see as most important in terms of making the construction sector more sustainable.
Srinath, do you think we should share the question, the $50,000 question?
Yes, okay.
And people can then, when they respond, keep that in mind.
Yes.
In terms of, I think that might be useful.
Exactly. Thank you, Bijan. I think, yeah, that's a key question that we want to look at. Basically, our question is, if you were given $50,000, what project would you like to work on as industry participants? Just putting something there to see whether what really are pressing issues.
Well, I already addressed it, if I may say, but I think it comes down to procurement. The whole question of tendering, how we tender for projects, and the fact that most contractors out there are putting pricing together at their cost, and there's no return for it unless they get the job. With a larger contract, it's a case of there's so many jobs to go around, eventually they'll pick up a job, but you're only looking at a small percentage of the overall market. The larger percentage, again, are the small SMEs that are the backbone of our industry that are competing very harshly. So I think that's where we should be looking at to try and make it equitable for these players, an equitable playing field.
Yes, it touches on both environmental and social sustainability side very well. Yes.
If I can just add on that, I guess just to build on what John just mentioned there, just obviously from a construction industry perspective, there are still a number of blowouts happening, whether it be schedule blowout, cost blowout, and these things are not sustainable for the supply chain, for the industry as a whole, and so forth. So I think, you know, and I think as you mentioned, whether it's procurement or whether it's how projects and programs are set up, or indeed how it's procured, how it's designed, all these various things, and also how the industry gets more workflowed and more digitalized, to indeed look at how we can reduce the reasons of these blowouts, because I don't think anyone really turns up to have big all these blowouts, whether it be the clients or supply chain indeed. So I think just really looking at and that will indeed make construction sustainable, because there's going to be a lot of it, and we can't afford certainly these blowouts to continue.
So by that, I think you're referring to cost overruns.
Cost or schedule overruns, or safety, all the components of construction, really.
Yeah, Anish, for me, that all just really comes down to leadership. If there's any industry that's increasingly becoming complex as it becomes digitalized and the challenges are greater, it all comes down to leadership for me. So when you take like projects, procurement, leading teams, delegation, and balancing that social, environmental, and economic balance of sustainability. It all comes down to leadership and decision making. So I think that's where we're going. And I've talked about this to many people about the issue of leadership in the construction industry. It's akin to the military these days. And so, where's the frameworks, education, and knowledge for that? It's probably a gap in the industry.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point. Leadership is a key point. And so there are two things came about, blowouts in terms of cost, schedule, health and safety, and so on. And then issues related to leadership, issues related to procurement. Yeah.
If I could just add to that, perhaps in terms of leadership, not exactly leadership, but from a local government perspective, if I had $50,000 to initiate a project, I would actually have a look at some of the statutory instruments which would actually impede or facilitate or encourage sustainability outcomes. Within local government, we have some statutory instruments such as local environment plans. And normally councils build their local environment plans on a standard template, which has been around for quite a while. I think in terms of trying to provide some sustainability outcomes, that template is a little bit old. I don't think it's fit for purpose in the future. So I think there is an opportunity to provide leadership, if you want to call it that, through a statutory instrument like an LEP, and have a real close look at some contemporary outcomes we'd like in the sustainability space. I think there's too much weight given to things like development control plans to try and produce outcomes, but a DCP isn't a statutory instrument per se. It doesn't have the same statutory weight as an LEP. So you have a very diverse outcome across many different councils across New South Wales. That would be an area that I think would be worthwhile looking at. And associated with that, from local government's perspective, given what we've experienced, there seems to be an unjustifiable premium that's required to be paid when you're using an alternative to standard building materials, i.e. the sustainable or equivalent or alternative. And associated with that is, of course, that there is generally a lack of information in terms of application of those sustainable materials in the Australian environment. Perhaps that's just 3 points that I'd like to bring up from local government's perspective.
Thank you, Charles. Anyone wants to build on that, add to that?
Srinath, it's Colin. One of the great examples of sustainability that we're seeing across major projects is to understand how supply of materials might provide something to multiple projects. Good example is taking dirt from the Sydney Metro project out of the tunnels, putting that into the Western Sydney Airport. Now, what we don't have is a good data-based approach to what's happening across our projects to understand how each project might be able to undertake sustainable measures that plays across all 3 levels of government. So having that understanding of how materials might be shared between projects could be an interesting way to spend the $50,000 to set something up in that regard.
So are you referring to a database of material suppliers?
Well,
sharing data?
It's more about where people are looking for that exchange of materials. So not so much the suppliers, but how individual projects can recognise across the industry where they have a need for suppliers and where those suppliers might come from in a sustainable manner.
Okay.
I think to build on Colin's points there, you know, as an industry, we consume far too much of the world's resources. We're less productive than we should be when you benchmark us against other industries. So where would I spend the 50,000? Probably in a similar area to Colin's. You know, circular economy opportunities, resource efficiency, alternative materials. I mean, there are so many layers to the broad sustainability question. Going to your opening slide around that definition of sustainability, you know, how we encourage greater participation in the industry, how we address productivity issues, how we learn lessons out of the manufacturing realm and bring them into construction, or alternatively pivot construction into more of a manufacturing approach. Yeah, for me, I mean, there are lots of things that you could go at, some of which, certainly those procurement changes in procurement processes are being prosecuted in a number of other industry forums around the country. And we're seeing change at various levels of government. But I think the role for this forum could be around that circular economy and resource efficiency piece.
Colin, just to answer your question, I'm not sure if this has it in it, but the CSIRO developed a database or a system called Aspire. And that's essentially I think it's essentially a waste exchange database. I'm not quite sure how much of construction industry is using Aspire at the moment, but I think you're right. I don't think it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly the same concept, thanks, Sean, but no, not used in construction much yet.
Yeah, there's lots of pockets of development happening, and some of it people don't understand as well, and the usage and dissemination of information is a key issue. People don't know what is available out there as well. There is an issue coming out of that.
Yes, Srinath, I think taking James's point and Colin's as well, I think waste is the way we waste things in the industry, which I don't think people do it deliberately, but it's interesting doing an exercise. Roughly 0.3 to 0.5% of the cost of a project leaves the project in a bin every job. So if there's a way, for $50,000, it's a pretty simple way, if you could invest some money to try and reduce wastage at a project level, whether that's better use of recycled materials or better ways to recycle. Or other ways of just trying to get that cost down. But I'm bidding jobs all the time, and that's a pretty standard benchmark for rubbish going out of a job, which seems nuts given that we've brought it onto the job in the first place, and then we send it straight back out the door again. And just as a side note, very different thing, but $50,000 on another project we're doing at the moment was the cost of taking a building, not a big building, $20 million, from 5-star to 6-star Green Star. So it's not a significant investment to at times actually increase the rating of a building to get the building to operate more efficiently. I think the challenge to some extent is there's actually going to be a lot of things we can do, and it's how to, if you've got that 50K, where are you going to put it? It's going to get the best bang for the buck in the short term.
Yes, Nick, that's a very good, important point. Waste is a major contributor. Construction industry is a major contributor of waste, and therefore we have to look at that. One thing that we recently came across in some industry discussions is that how construction industry treat liquid waste. We talk about C&D waste quite a lot, but not much attention paid on liquid waste. This is something that came about in one of the recent discussions that we had with some parties.
So in that, Srinath, are you talking about stormwater, or is there another form of liquid waste that you're referring to?
We're talking about like paint related or things like that, or anything that is cleaned up and then going out of the site, things like that, wash areas, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Any other? Yeah, I have noted down a few aspects of coming from leadership issues to construction supply chain related issues, and the cost schedule, waste, health and safety, blowouts brought about of those things, local government perspectives coming out of DCP and other aspects, then supply chain materials related issues, database of suppliers, material suppliers, how to look at those aspects, Improving productivity was brought about as a main aspect, yes. And then changes in procurement processes, how we can improve procurement in the construction sector, to improve sustainability characteristics, circular economy, sharing of information. I mean, lots of people create a lot of data, create a lot of research projects, and then outcomes coming out of that, how much is disseminated. Then the issue of waste, how do we deal with waste? 0.3 to 0.5% of cost relates to waste. That's what Nick mentioned. So that's an important key, I think, figure that we can look at, how we can improve those characteristics.
So Srinath, if I may,
Yes.
I'd like to pick up a slightly different point. It occurs to me that in the building and construction sector at the moment, we're still seeing an uplift in need, particularly if you look at, if we take New South Wales transport as an indicator, we're not yet at the top of the wave, the peak of the resources required from the sector. Now, being old enough to remember some of the cycles in the industry, as that pressure comes on for the supply and demand to provide more, we're going to see pressure on quality outcomes, on work health and safety outcomes, on time and cost, some of the blowouts that were mentioned earlier. We're also going to see pressure on industrial relations and eventually disputes. And you get all that pressure starts to really, I suppose, highlight some of the weaknesses or areas that we don't have tightened up enough. I'd like to suggest that there's two main areas that can help prevent those things occurring. One is to get a lot more serious about what quality management really should be. I'm sure we'd all have to agree that it's been given a bit of a lip service. Yes, everyone's certified and everyone says they do quality, but when you get to the heart of the fact that quality management is about understanding what the requirements and objectives are and having an effective and efficient way of delivering those intended outcomes, we're way off in a lot of the detail. And I'll say, to the point made earlier, particularly below the top tier. The top tier have a sufficient size and robustness to carry some of that extra burden, whereas it makes it much more difficult down the supply chain. But I think the other thing for us at the moment is a focus on skill and an ability to transfer skills. So if we just look at professionals, for example, engineers, architects, project managers, etc., they may have had experience and skill development in a certain part of the sector, but the building and construction sector is broad and it's also evolving. We need to be able to transfer skills. So we've got some very capable people that have got 20 years in XYZ, but we need, as the demand for that particular skill drops off and it picks up in a digitization or something similar, we need to transfer those very capable resources to develop them with new skill sets. And I think that, to me, is part of how we make sure that the limited resources that we have available in our sector in this country can be repurposed, repositioned, and ultimately help ensure that we are sustainable from the point of view that we, apart from material resources, we actually have limited personnel resources, personal resources, human resources, and we've got to be able to apply them in the best place and really maximize the capability and capacity from those human resources.
as time is catching up and we have exceeded the time that we wanted to spend on that, we don't have a problem of staying along, but I would like to wrap it up. And Bijan, do you have any points to add on to wrap up? Add on to the discussion, or we can briefly mention about one of the research collaboration opportunities on the RIS project.
I was going to just say that time was actually short. It seems like we are just starting to warm up. But
that's right.
Nevertheless, I would like to extend an invitation to all the people who are here to write to us if there was things that you think of later on. Maybe Srinath and I can provide our respective email address to all of you who are registered to be part of this forum. And you feel free, please, to write to us if there was things that are important enough to be discussed and we couldn't discuss because of shortage of time.
Yes. The final thing we wanted to present was actually there is an opportunity for industry collaboration in an ARC research hub proposal that is led by UNSW, but Western Sydney is a key collaborator, and that is the resilient and intelligent infrastructure systems in urban resources and energy sectors, basically covering a wide variety, related aspects in construction sector. Bijan, do you want to speak a little bit into that? A minute?
Sure. It's a good opportunity. Again, as I said earlier, the matching funding coming from Australian Research Council up to a maximum of $5 million. It's a 5-year program, 1 million from industry per year minimum, and 1 million from government. So we can propose projects to do with infrastructure systems, and almost you can shape it to fit in. Deadline is soon, so if you are really thinking of taking advantage of this, which gives you one-to-one funding matching fund, please let us know.
What is the minimum contribution expected?
There is no minimum, but I think something in the order of 30 to 50,000 a year probably is acceptable, but nothing less than 20,000, I would say, per year. You don't have to commit to the whole 5 years. If you want it to be faster, it can be larger contributions, but for a shorter period of 2 years, for example. Yeah, but if you want to stretch it to 5 years, contribution can be less per year. But that is about what is expected there. Around 100,000 for the 5 years is the minimum.
Srinath and Bijan, can I ask if you have in mind a geographic boundary for the collaborative effort that we're talking about? I mean, Western Sydney University is across Sydney, Western Sydney in particular. Do you see that this has some form of Sydney or Western Sydney focus? Do you see it as being broader in terms of the New South Wales context, or broader than that still?
Are you, Brendan, referring to this particular hub? Or
I'm really referring to any and all avenues of collaboration that you at Western Sydney are connecting us into. To me, I like to understand the framework that's available so that we can each determine how we best contribute and provide value, perhaps a lot of us with limited time. So it makes sense to me that we become quite clear about the framework of opportunity or the need, and then what that looks like in terms of specific sector areas or in terms of geography. I for instance, don't recognize the term ARC in terms of ARC Research Hub. So yeah, if you could, between you both, help us understand what the framework looks like and where we can best position ourselves to assist and add value.
Australian Research Council is what the acronym ARC stands for. But it's a very good point, Brandon, in the sense that since Western Sydney is the hub of economic activities and the most active part of Australia at the moment, and our university happens to be in the same region, by default, there is a lot of focus on Western Sydney.
Sure.
However, having said that, many of our research projects and engagements are across the board, whole of New South Wales, whole of Australia, even internationally. So we do have a lot of international partners. So I think one can say sky is the limit, but with obvious focus. But the best is if there is anything we are not sure, we communicate. We had one of the C's covered, which was the conversation. The next one is communication. So I think we need to keep talking to each other and clarify various things.
Can I suggest, just to add one point to my comments, where I have seen this form of collaboration work best is that there's a very clear facilitation provided by the likes of Western Sydney University that can, as you're doing right now, facilitate the very specific resources. So we're all here representing various entities, but it might well be as you form project teams or similar, well, then we can populate others to participate in a more focused way, but grow the resources that are available for this contribution and collaboration.
Yes, certainly, Brendan, we will be doing that, and also creating more opportunities to consult the industry as we go along. We know, I mean, lots of people joined in for a short period here, and I think thank you very much for joining in. We made a short request, and there was very good buy-in to and coming in, and we appreciate that very much. We had a good conversation about it. Of course, as Bijan mentioned, we were just warming up at this point, but it's not enough time available. But everybody's got time pressures for various things. So as such, we need to wrap this session up. And thank you very much again from the Western Sydney University, from Centre for Smart Modern Construction, from Centre for Infrastructure Engineering. We appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.